Hi there, I'm Thomas and welcome to Prussian Hussar. Today we talk about field caps of the German Army. It would be these ones or these ones. In World War I, we focus on the Troopers variant. Additionally, we will dive into the Cocards as well. This would be these little dots here, because they were an important part of the field caps themselves, especially as a sign of origin of the regiments. About the contents of this video. As always, after this quick introduction, we start with the Cocards, their evolving and their meaning. Afterwards, we have a look at the evolving of field caps from the colorful ones to the field gray version up to the end of the war. And in the end, we will have a conclusion. Let's dive right in. Now, let's have a first look at the field caps themselves. Before the field gray version was introduced, there were the colorful ones to find, like in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, until the year 1907, for recruits even until the end of the war. A difference apart from the colors we find in the Cocards. The first Prussian Cocard was introduced in 1813. Until the year 1867, only the state Cocard was used, like the Prussian one in black and white. From then on, the Cocard of the North German Federation came into use, which was black and white. With this huge regulation published on the 22nd March in 1897, the additional Reichskokarde or Imperial Cockade in white, black and red came into service. Besides the Prussian Cocard, there were different ones for all the different states and duchies, and even some special cities. Looking at this panel, we can see all the variants. The Bavarians, for example, had theirs in white and light blue. The Württemberger had theirs in black and red. Saxony was green and white, just to mention the larger body of troops and not to get lost in all the smaller and special duchies. They all had the Reichskokarde in common, of which I can show you an original in perfect condition. Then there was a distinction not only by the origin of heritage, but as part of being from an active regiment or from the reserves. The active regiments, which did their duty as war broke out, had just the Cocards, where the reserve troops often had a small silver cross on their Cocards. Additionally, we see on this photo an original field cap of the 8th Hussars from the reserve formation, which was the 5th Reserve Hussar Regiment. Of course, during the war it became wild, and the reserve and active Cocards were mixed after a time, if not already from the start of the war. The even older ones had a cross in gold on their Cocard. A side note, if you got arrested or charged and found guilty, you actually had to take off the Reichskokarde or Imperial Cockade, so everybody could see that you lost your honor and were a soldier second class. Before the Reichskokarde was introduced, you had to take off the other one. Usually there was sewed on the field cap. Some, like this original here, had little pieces of metal that could be pushed through the fabric and then bent to hold on. So much for the Cocards. Now moving on to the field caps, or the Krätzchen, a very German word. As we know, field grey uniforms were introduced in 1907. The pattern of the field cap stayed the same as before, but the color scheme was reduced to the new field grey standard. The former broad set of colors, which all had specific meanings, is now to be found in the pipes and stripes. Especially the colorful traditions of the cavalry were transferred to or even saved in these caps. A marvelous example are the field caps of the Hussars, like the one that I'm wearing. So, let me start here with the traditional and colorful uniform of the 8th Hussars. As we can observe in this picture of an original uniform, and read in the regulations, the former color of the uniform of the 8th Hussars was a dark blue with white soutaches and white highlights. Looking deeper into the parts of the uniform, which are shown on this table more detailed. Like the previous field cap, busby, greatcoat and saddle cloth, we can identify a light blue. Now looking at the field cap in field grey, we see the dark blue of the former uniform as the broader middle stripe, accompanied with white piping around it and an additional pipe in light blue up here, obviously as a reminiscence to the old colors of the former uniform. On this colored photograph of the 8th Hussars in the field, we can see in the background the field caps in use on actual Hussars and how the blue and white stand out. Zooming a bit out and looking at all the other Hussar regiments here on this table, we recognize that almost all of the Hussar regiments had the second additional piping on the upper part. Zooming out further to all the other troops, there sure was a distinction of different kinds of troops in their field caps. So, all the technical and artillery troops had a black band and red piping. The infantry just a red band and a red piping on the upper part, which I can show you actually here on this reproduction I got. Most of the Uhlans, another kind of cavalry, had the same field cap as the infantry. The Jäger or hunters had a green band on their field cap. Not going too deep into detail here, I just mention and show here on these tables a part of all the different styles and colors the field caps had, especially regarding the different formations and regiments of the cavalry. It was really wired. Of course, there were critics about the field cap that a visor or a peak of the cap was missing. Therefore, it was not practical for the troopers, because they could easily be dazzled by the sun. Those visors were not added or allowed only on private purchases. At least the troopers were allowed to purchase one if they got the money. The caps of the officers, of course, had a peak or a visor. A further notice about the red band of the infantry at most of the Uhlans. Since the red was widely visible for the enemy, there soon was a Mützenverdeckband or a cover-up for the field cap. Those covers were introduced already in the second year of the war for the troops in the front lines, but were soon economized because of the material shortages. On the 20th of July 1917, a unified field cap for all the troops was introduced, which had a green band and green piping, while the Bavarian one was completely made of field grey colored fabric. So it was possible to wear the field cap in the field without additional camouflage and cover-ups. The cover-ups were abolished, but first the old stocks of already made field caps had to be used, before they could get on the new ones. Additionally is to mention that especially the cavalry regiments were very proud of their heritage, so they often tried by all costs to hold on to their old pieces, or even tried to privately purchase the old ones in order to show and defend the status of cavalry. Even as some of the cavalry regiments later had to give away their horses and were transformed into foot cavalry regiments. So much for the history of the field caps. At some point I'm going to try and produce one, but not today. Now we have seen that on the field cap there was a reminiscence to the old colorful uniforms visible, apart from some piping, especially on the cavalry uniforms. So it was a highly symbolic and I would guess therefore important, but I cannot locate the importance in the sources so far. The field caps were widely worn by the troopers, as an uncountable mass of photographs shows, and was therefore a really important part of the equipment. Due to the overall visibility in every corner, it is a pretty iconic and symbolic item of equipment for the German soldiers of World War I. If you have any questions or remarks, just write them below in the comments. So, thank you all for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Have a good one.